Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond Limits podcast. I'm very excited because I have a special guest, Kayla, on with me today, and we are going to be diving into all of the things. This is really an episode. I'm so glad it's happening in January because it's going to set you up to really thrive not only this season, considering it's winter, but also the rest of the year. So, Kayla, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
So, can you tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and all of that fun stuff?
Yes, so I'm Kayla. I am a content creator and social media strategist. I live in New York City. I've been creating content in some way, shape, or form for well over a decade now. Have just always loved oversharing on the internet. And for me, now so much of what I do is talking about life in your 30s, kind of the things that I felt like I was not seeing other people talk about, mental health, little things to do to live a slightly softer, more intentional life, and trying to be both honest but also give tips about how to live your best life along the way.
Now, with that, did you come from like having maybe like a lifetime ago where it was very like hustle, like grind, where you were living kind of the opposite? Or is that kind of like soft living always been present for you and something that you've always kind of followed?
I think I'm living it right now and I'm trying to be a work in progress if I'm going to be very honest about it. I am both a content creator and I also do still have a 9 to 5 job. So I do quite a bit in any given day as far as trying to cram it all in. So I think for me, and so much of my content is really sharing in real time what I'm doing and trying to figure out and the little things I've picked up along the way, but also being really honest that like I'm definitely a work in progress. I'm definitely struggling a lot with burnout and hustle culture and finding what the balance looks like when you're ambitious and have a lot of hopes, dreams, and desires, but also are realizing that it takes a toll on you. So I would say I'm in work in progress. And I think that's some of the beauty is I definitely don't have it all figured out.
I mean, like, does anyone really have it all figured out? I feel like it's always like an evolution, a journey. Like everyone's figuring it out and like getting better and better. No one's perfect at anything. With that, what are some of like the big things that to you have made a big difference? Would you say in your life? Are they like resources, books, practices, like maybe it's just a mindset shift? Like what are some of those like big things that like, oh, once I anchored that in or once I like learned that, that really like was a game changer and made a difference for me?
Mm. There's definitely a few things that come to mind. Number one, as far as kind of I guess I'll call it a mantra, a like phrase that I've been trying to remind myself is that there is time and I don't need to do everything right now. And I'm sure anyone listening that is also a slightly more intense, ambitious person, which I'm sure many of you are, it's this desire of like the second I have an idea or want to do something, I immediately am like, oh, I have this idea. I must launch it tomorrow and put this pressure on myself. And no one else is putting that pressure on me. There's really no difference if I launch it tomorrow versus in a month or 2 months. So something I'm really trying to work on is telling myself to slow down and map things out and remembering that like there is time. Just because there is something I want to do right now doesn't mean I need to launch it tomorrow when I don't have potentially the capacity to take that on right now, even if it is something I really want to do. So that's something I've really been working on. At the beginning of the year, I literally sat down and mapped out my 2025 as far as just like a really realistic look at, okay, this month is when I want to launch this thing. This month is when I'll be focusing on this in my content, and just being really honest with myself that like I don't need to do it all right this second, even though there is that strong desire. But how can I have this more long-term goal in mind and give myself that permission to wait until I do have the ability to actually give it my all? And then I think I'm a really big fan of just little rituals and little things, and this belief that a lot of little things do add up, and that there's sometimes so much pressure to have these like big sweeping morning rituals or evening rituals or like wellness practices when little things can make a huge difference. Like for me, I am a really big believer in walking as a huge part of my productivity, wellness, and just like sanity these days. That for me, a big thing I do is when I'm shifting from my 9 to 5 job, I go for what I call a fake commute because I work from home. And that like signals the shift from 9 to 5 life to living at home life essentially, or moving on to my own projects. I really like to have these like little rituals throughout the week. Like I always have sushi on Thursdays as something to look forward to, and I think is this good reminder of like, okay, we did it. We just about made it through the week. We're gonna be okay. So that, and then I've always been a really big journaler and someone who definitely processes my thoughts, feelings, what's going on through writing it out and exploring it that way. So for me, definitely someone who, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I got to put pen to paper and just kind of get it all out there.
I love that you have those anchor points like a sushi. I saw that yesterday in your stories, or I guess this morning from yesterday. Like those anchor points, like the walk. Also, I love walks as well. Like I have to walk every day. But people I think maybe underestimate like that those little anchors can make a big difference because it really like closes off one and like opens it. I think sometimes when people think it's either an all or nothing, and if they don't have time or they can't do 50 different things and like work out and go for a walk and take their colostrum and blah, blah, like, I don't know, they do nothing versus like you're better off doing like smaller things, even like throughout the day, not just always in the morning. And I think sometimes people talk about, I want this morning routine, but like, who has a 5 hour morning routine? Like, sometimes it's like
I
little
know.
things throughout the day that are actually going to be better for you because it's going to like break up that energy more and get you to refocus versus like 5 hours in the morning and then nothing else, the rest of the day or the rest of the week. I also have sushi every week. I have it on Fridays.
Love
So
it.
for me
Ooh,
today's my
Sushi
sushi.
Friday.
I'm very excited. So I love that we're on it with the sushi. And I love that you also talked about like the ability to like slow down and not necessarily like launch things right away. Like a lot of people listening to this are entrepreneurs, we're ambitious, we want to do things, but sometimes like it's a not right now and taking more time to slow it down versus I think sometimes it's that FOMO or that if you don't like bring it to life right now, you are somehow going to miss out and it won't work or it won't happen or you know, it's coming from like a scarcity energy or a pressure energy versus coming from like a oh, I'm so alive, this needs to come out. It's like, yes, it's alive and I feel like it needs to be now or somehow it's going to fleet away or not happen or go away. And I know you also, I love the reel you posted recently. It was like you journaling and you were talking about kind of the duality of like feeling behind, but also having accomplished a lot and how it can be both. And like, yes. And I don't think that enough women really recognize that it can be both. And they're like, they almost judge or shame themselves from like, well, I should be really grateful because I've done all these things and I have all these things. And yet I still kind of feel behind. And like, it is both. Like you can be, I love when you talked about that. So can we kind of dive more into that? Cause I was like, spot on. I feel like this speaks to so many women and that the shame or judgment for either not feeling gratitude or feeling behind and that like that tension in their body that they experience.
Totally. And for me, I definitely started to realize feeling this duality of these just conflicting feelings and that two things can be true. I know when I was looking at kind of my 2024 as a whole and like reflecting on here's what I accomplished, here's what I didn't accomplish, here's the goals I hit. And I definitely had that really complex feeling of there were so many great things that happened in 2024. And yet I felt so disappointed by certain things that didn't happen or expectations that I had set upon myself that it felt like I failed at. And it was this moment of why am I only focusing on what didn't happen as opposed to like what did as well, and kind of giving myself that permission that it can be both, that there can be, okay, like I did not accomplish everything I wanted to. Let's regroup and figure out how we can make that happen this year or this month or whenever the time period is. But also, I can give myself a pat on the back and say, look at all these incredible things that happen that you made happen. And for me, so much of my 30s has been that duality of at the beginning of my 30s, I was single, I was newly out of a really long relationship. And it was this complex feeling of I really loved my life and so many of the things that I had built around me. but also I was lonely and really struggling with that kind of weird feeling of everyone around me starting to get married and leave New York City and things of that nature. So, kind of this weird, I didn't want exactly what they had, but I also was like, something feels like I'm desiring it essentially. So, it made me realize just so much of life is that duality of two things can be true at once. And it's a complicated thing to sit with, but that doesn't mean it's not valid.
And I like how you said valid because it's important to honor the both. I think when you try to like bypass it, like, well, no, like I should be grateful. It's almost like you're not acknowledging, and it almost gets to like a toxic positivity where instead of like honoring your feelings as valid, women are like, okay, let's just like affirm out of it or like gratitude out of it. And like, we're all here for gratitude. But I don't think enough people realize that like you can have gratitude and also process the emotions of frustration or disappointment or sadness or things that didn't work out or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, with your planning for the year, are there things that, because you mentioned realistic, how do you kind of like plan things out and how can like the listeners plan their year in a way that either for like for you is realistic, but it also maybe, I feel like you are ambitious, right? So there's that line between like ambitious but realistic, maybe a little delulu energy, like well,
Of
having to kind of
course.
like do all that where you're setting goals, but there's not too much pressure where they're like out of this world and you're like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to like do all these things.
Hmm. So for me, I literally sat down and wrote out every month of the year. And I'm a big, like, I need to visualize it and tactilely feel it. And I wrote down all of these ideas and things that I knew I want to do this year and things that I do every year. Like I always do an end of the year journaling challenge. So I know, okay, that's 99.9% sure that will happen in December. Great. I know what I'm doing there. And then I was really honest with myself about the ebbs and flows of different seasons in my life. For example, right now at my 9 to 5 job, it is a really busy, chaotic time that we are in a really intense launch for a product. So I know now is not the time for me to be all in on my own business stuff. I just did not have that creative capacity. But I do know that come March, things will swing in the other direction and work will be a little bit more easier to manage so that I will have that creative space. So I noted on my calendar of like, okay, I've been thinking about launching a YouTube channel and like that is the time to do it. As much as I wanted to be like January 1st, here we go. I was like, no, 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 no. We are excited about this, but to do it right now would just be adding stress as opposed to making it feel like this is a sustainable thing that I can give the correct energy to. And I went month by month, just noting those natural ebbs and flows that I know about. For example, I know summer is usually a season that I like to slow down in my own business and really just enjoy all of the great things about summer in New York City. So, noting that, and then around that, noting other things that I want to do as far as ebook launches and mini challenges and the bigger things. And will all of this happen in that direction? I don't know. And I'm sure things will come up and things will change and opportunities will arise that makes me realize, oh wait, definitely can't do this thing that I had thought I was going to do in August. But it made me feel a lot better that I don't need to do it all right this second, that it can be this slow build and I can look at this year more holistically as opposed to like, I have to get everything out there right now, otherwise things aren't going to go or it's all a failure. So for me, really slowing down and zooming out for a second and thinking about, okay, realistically, how can this year go? But then also approaching it with a gentleness that I'm not going to be disappointed if it's not 100% that way, but more having it be a living, breathing document that can change.
And I think people also underestimate like what can happen in a year and with like that slow burn. Like you think like, oh, it's a year, but you could come to the end of the year and be like, oh, okay, that actually is a lot when you realize the slow burn. It's kind of like working out the slow burn, like ends up being more effective than necessarily like, hit workouts or like aggressive workouts. So I kind of like was thinking about that when you were talking, oh, like the slow
Mm-hmm.
burn actually creates more results. And sometimes like going quote unquote slower, even though it feels slower, creates the more results and more momentum than necessarily thinking that more is more.
Yeah, totally.
Now you also create content. You have a 9 to 5. How do you create content and do all that and like not be burnt out? Like how do you make content creation easier, or how do you approach content creation? Because for me, like there are a lot of people in my world who even get overwhelmed with content creation and that's their job, and that's they don't also have another job. So like how have you either like a mindset, or how do you approach content creation in a way that maybe feels light or allows it to feel lighter for you not to feel pressure? Do you follow trends? Do you not? Like kind of like what is your whole process and how do you think about it and how do you do it in a way? Because I feel like from the outside it looks like you're just light and like it's I want to say easy, but like it just feels like it feels relaxing. Your page feels relaxing. So like how do you give me that energy, or like how intentional are you even like with all that?
hmm I mean, I'm glad to hear that that is the energy it gives off, as I always hope my space is, I don't know, a soft place to land in a place on the internet where there's just so much chaotic energy and a lot being thrown at you. For me, when I think about, let's say, a week of content, I like to make sure I have a mix of different types of content, both for Instagram strategy purposes, but also for my own sanity and time capacity. While I love doing a day in the life videos, those take a while to edit, is just the reality of it. Even when I think it's going to be a really easy, quick edit, it never is. It's always a decent amount of work compared to throwing text over a video of me drinking my morning coffee is a lot more low lift. So for me, throughout the week, I definitely try to have this mix of high lift content and then low lift content. A lot of it is really just organically what I'm thinking about. Like, for example, at the time of recording this, yesterday, I was just in a really bad mood. I was just, the cold winter blahs were getting to me. It's been a really stressful week to be a social media manager and just a lot of thoughts and feelings swirling around. So I just spent a few minutes writing down how I was feeling about it and then kind of formulating that into a carousel. Pulled pictures that I already had on my phone or like took some photos around my apartment just to have something to slap it on and went for it. And I think for me, I definitely take the mentality of like done is better than perfect, and my content is definitely not perfect. There's oftentimes there's funny every so often like a really viral reel will have a typo, and I'm just kind of like, is what it is. And I know a lot of people don't have that mentality, but to me, if that's going to be what stops me from getting content out there, that just doesn't fly for me. So I really try to look at it as this like holistic week of creating the different types of content. And then also giving myself that permission of some days I'm just not going to post because I don't have it in me. I don't have the right thing. And it feels like I'm trying to force something out essentially, but giving myself that permission to step back when I need to. I also keep a ongoing notes on my phone of just like random kernels of ideas that I'm working through or stuff. So it's a lot of, this is where my like being both content creator but also like social media strategy nerd on the side and everything from being a 9 to 5 social media manager of kind of trying to meld the two of being strategic but also just being authentic and honest to how I'm feeling and what is going on in my real life.
So you plan like the content for the week, and then you kind of day to day you might like if something pops up you'll write a post, or do you write and make your content like that day, or is like oh at the beginning of the week you have your content set for the week?
It depends, honestly. It's like for my 9 to 5 job, I'm so planned out that I have like the content calendar in place. I try to do that sometimes for my own content, but it just doesn't feel right to me because sometimes energetically it just feels weird. So for me, sometimes it's more I'll have like a rough idea of like, okay, here are the type of things that I typically hit during a week, like almost content pillars of, okay, I usually have a book post every week or so talking about life in your 30s, mental health, mix of carousels and reels, day in the life, and kind of letting it naturally flow with how I'm feeling or what I'm excited to share about that day. For me, there's definitely some times of the year that are a little bit more planned out. Like end of the year was definitely very planned out for me, that I had like, okay, here are the 5 pieces of content that I know I want to get out in the next final week of the year. So that was definitely more thinking about, okay, this post makes more sense on this day, whereas this one's definitely the New Year's Eve post versus the January 1st post. So that was a lot more planned out. But I realized for me that I think there's a time and a place for content planning. And if that's what gets it done for you, then I think that's a really great approach. And some people I think work really well within that constraint. For me, I just don't always like it and the feeling of it. I find myself sometimes resenting having to create that content. So I try to more think of it as here are the rough points that I want to hit this week. Maybe it will change as the week goes on, as the world goes on, but kind of having a rough idea of like checkpoints I want to hit throughout the week, but I don't sit down on Sunday or Monday and plan out the full week of content.
Now you're also a social media strategist. So how do you balance like what you want to share, maybe what you want to create, and also strategy when it comes to Instagram and algorithm and like I don't know, would you say it's like I honor 70% of what I want to do and like 30% or like how do you maybe it's not a percent, maybe like how do you think about that and approach the balance of like, well, let's play the Instagram game and let's also honor our authenticity, our creativity. How do you kind of approach that?
Great question. Couple thoughts on this. Of course, my brain is like starting to bubble up and explode already because I love nerding out about this kind of stuff. So, first things first is for me, I always try to start with what the content is and then figure out its form from there. So, kernel of an idea, here's what I want to talk about. And then that's when I put on the strategy hat and think, okay, what is the best way to present this piece of content and information? Is it a reel? Is it a more vlog type of video? Is it a carousel? Is this really more of like an Instagram story thing that I like throw as a one off? Is it a thing I post on threads and then screenshot it in the future to share as a meme style thing? So I sit there and really think about, okay, what is the best way to present this information and then go from there. I think the beauty of Instagram is that you can experiment with it, that maybe the first time you share this idea, it's shared as a reel and it does really well. Then you think, okay, how can I create the carousel version of this? How can I create the like screenshotted thread version of it essentially? So for me, I usually try to think of what it is that I want to share first and then how is the best way to share it that I think will serve the tools that Instagram gives me the most. And then within that, there's also definitely the thinking of different pieces of content serve different purposes for my brand. There are pieces of content that are really growth focused that I know those are the pieces of content that either go viral or just bring a lot of new followers to me because of something that it says, and oftentimes something that it says about me. Then there's different posts that are more of the like, I needed to hear this post that they might not go as viral, they might not get as many likes, but I know that they have this really strong impact on my community. And that to me, I consider that a metric in and of itself of if someone tells me they needed to hear this, that is so important to me and everything that I'm going for, that is so much more important than the engagement, the likes, the follows, any of that stuff. And then looking at different pieces of content of, okay, stuff that is optimized for shares, for saves, for when I was selling different products and things of like, okay, the focus of this post is getting someone to buy this thing that I'm selling. So really thinking of each piece of content of like, what is my goal of this piece of content? And that might make it sound really stark and kind of pure strategy-y, but sometimes that goal is I want this to resonate with someone. I want someone to feel less alone. And it's that simple of I say something because I'm thinking about it and I imagine other people are thinking about it. But then other times it might be that more strategic thought of like, okay, the goal is to have people comment and have them many chats, send them the journal that I'm selling or something of that nature. So looking at each piece of content as what is my goal for this and how can I best achieve that?
I think that's such a good question that everyone should just ask when they're writing a piece of content. And it sounds kind of like simple, but when you actually think about bringing more intentionality to the content piece of like, all right, is this a growth piece of content? Is this more for like the people following me and the resonating? And also balancing those different types of content. I think maybe sometimes people think, oh, it's just about growth content and getting new people in. But I love how you like, well, no, we need different forms. We need to nurture people who are there. Like, we speak to them. Then we need some that's going to bring in new, and really thinking about it and balancing the content you create, whether what's in the week or within the whatever time frame. I think what's going to serve so many people, and having like a goal. And it sounds strategic, but it's even like the goal can be energetic. Like you said, the goal of like someone need to hear this. It's not like, oh, the goal of this going viral. It's like, no, the goal of like, this is going to touch someone and they need to hear this, I think is also important goals. And I think if people were to articulate maybe the different goals that they had for the different posts, perhaps like you could create more powerful pieces of content from that when you're looking at the lens of like, oh, what do I actually want this to do, versus maybe throwing it up and not anchoring it with an intention or a purpose behind it. I think purpose just makes everything kind of more cohesive.
Totally. It's so funny. It's you saying that. It reminds me of this is so true both as a content creator or if you're posting content for a business, that this is what I think about when I'm posting for the company I work at of what is the purpose of this post? And if I don't know what that purpose is, then it's probably not a very worthwhile thing to post. And sometimes that purpose is sales, which is totally fine. That is one of the purposes, but chances are that should be the least touched upon purpose. That thing should be the purpose of this is follower or education or this or that, or just making someone feel seen. And just really thinking of like, why am I posting this? And how is the best way that I can get this thing to happen that I want to happen from it?
Now, speaking of intention, I feel like obviously your content is very intentional. And like you've been talking a lot about winter. So I want to bring in winter because it is relevant for right now. And I love winter. I love snow.
Ooh,
I love winter. It snowed yesterday. I'm like, I love winter. I know that's not the case for everyone. I know I'm probably like a
no.
unicorn. Most people do not. So as someone who does not, and I probably have people listening who does not, and you've been sharing a lot of content about like how you're kind of, I think you're calling it cozy girl era, how you're making the most out of winter, how you're kind of learning to like it a little bit more. Can we talk about kind of what you're doing and maybe the mindsets or the perspectives you have around winter that is making, as someone who doesn't normally love it? Because I feel like when I talk about it, I'm like, yeah, I love it. But different when someone who's trying to love it talks about it.
Yes. I am a summer girly through and through. I thrive in the summer. I am my happiest self. I'm just like walking down the streets of New York in the best mood ever for the entirety of summer. That is my time to shine. So with that being said, not a big fan of winter, but I'm trying to really lean into what it is that the season offers. And in New York, it's cold, it's kind of a slower time that I feel like people aren't socializing as much. There's a lot less of that like last minute after work, like, wait, want to go meet up? There's this place I've been wanting to try that has like a really cute setup because I feel like we're just none of us are very motivated. It's already dark by the time the workday ends and all of that. So I've been really trying to lean into it as my cozy era and kind of this hibernation season of really turning more inward when I think summer is such an outward focus season of being more extroverted, being more out and about, being staying up late and just like doing a lot more things. So for me, I have been really trying to focus on how I can like lean into that hibernation. Like for my boyfriend recently moved in and we've been playing video games together, which is something I never thought I would particularly care about. But like we found this adorable two-player game that like it's been this really fun thing at night to be like, okay, we're gonna like play an hour of our game together, and there's like nothing better I can be doing and like not something I need to be more productive doing. I've been kind of using it as this time to really, really be more reflective. As I was saying earlier, it's a really busy season at my 9 to 5 job. So it's maybe not my most productive time as far as like what I'm producing for my own brand, but how can I use this as a time to like start to think and do a little bit of behind the scenes work that doesn't require as much pressure and like output necessarily. I've been just trying to like give myself permission to do less, to be outside less if I'm not feeling it, to lean into the desire to just like be on the couch reading, to make tea at night and just like create this really cozy atmosphere. So for me, I've been really just trying to lean into what it is that this season offers as opposed to focusing on all the things I hate about it and all the ways it's not summer and not my favorite season. So I've been trying to just like really get cozy with it and enjoy it for what it is and know that soon enough I'll be back in summer mode as I want to be.
It's so funny you're talking about video games because for Christmas, my fiance bought a Nintendo Switch, and
Yes.
I didn't have like video games growing up. So this is my first time playing video games. We have
Oh,
Mario
wow.
Kart. So we've been
Yes.
playing Mario Kart. I'm like, oh my God, this is fun. So it's so funny that you mentioned like you guys are playing because like I'm playing video games for the first time in my life. And it is kind of fun. It's like kind of competitive. I'm like, I want to win. I
Yeah.
want to get better. So it's so funny that you also are playing video games.
Yeah, it's very, I grew up, I'm an older brother, so I was definitely like the little sister that watched way more video games than I ever wanted to in my entire life. So it's funny now, like playing more of it with my boyfriend. But I would definitely recommend Mario Party's a fun one on the Switch, as it's like essentially a board game. So I would definitely recommend that one.
Okay, perfect. Now, speaking of recommendations, with the cozy, with like the books and the teas, are there books you've been loving, teas you've been loving, recipes you've been loving, like things you're like, oh, this cozy candle, I don't know, socks, like what paint me the picture of like, oh, my optimal cozy vibe is like this candle, this recipe, this tea, this book,
Yes.
something.
So when it comes to tea right now, my my boyfriend's actually like the one that makes the really good tea, ironically, that I feel like I mess it up always. So I make him make me tea, which it works out because like I'm better at making like a coffee drink. So we have our strengths. So we've been doing that we live near a Wegmans. So there's like a decaffeinated cinnamon chai tea that they have, which is really good. And I think chai usually is caffeinated, so it's like nice to have a decaffeinated version. We've been doing that with hot water, honey, and then either frothing or just putting a splash of oat milk in as a little bit. And it's just like so soothing, so cozy, and just like feels like a warm hug in a cup. So definitely that. I'm a big fan of Chappy Wrap is a blanket brand, and they have these really soft, they're almost fleece, but like a really soft version of fleece blankets that are machine washable. So for a while, I feel like anytime someone was over, whether like being with my boyfriend or like a friend was over watching TV, we were like fighting over the one blanket. So I finally bought additional ones so that like everyone can have their own. I bought one even for just like have at my desk and like have in my lap on cold days, and it just like feels really nice. Um, as far as reading, my 9 to 5 job is in the book industry, so I'm a huge reader and give a lot of book recommendations. I am a fiction girly through and through. I feel like so much of my life is kind of thinking about personal development otherwise, but when it comes to reading, I just want to get like lost in a book. So I feel like I've been in a big romance era lately of just like wanting like ooey gooey happy books that just feel nice and cozy. Um, Also, I'm a big bath person, so I love Dr. Teal's has these really good Epsom salts and what's it called? Like bath foaming stuff in lavender, and I feel like it's just like after that, I'm just like ready to snuggle up in bed and go off to sleep. So it's just like that perfect like bring myself to a sleepy state at the end of the day.
Is there a particular book that you've been loving that you read? Because I don't read any fiction actually. So I will take a fiction recommendation. Or if you're like, no, in 2024, maybe this was like the best book you read. Maybe that's too difficult. I don't know.
Ooh,
Or maybe it's like a series or an author that like you, oh, I've read multiple books from this author.
I'll give you two recommendations right now of like these are the books that I've been thinking about. I think my favorite book I read last year, and I read it right at the end, so it kind of came in last minute, was it's called Margot's Got Money Troubles. And the premise sounds ridiculous. It's about a 19-year-old who ends up getting pregnant after having an affair with her professor. And she ends up turning to, the more I say it, the more ridiculous it sounds. She ends up creating an OnlyFans account essentially to make money to support her and
Okay.
her child. And her dad is like an ex pro wrestler, so really good at creating persona and kind of this fictional character and a brand. And it's just this like really beautiful story about kind of this 19-year-old coming into herself and just like figuring out who she is and her relationship with her dad and the people around her. So it's just like this really beautiful, different book. So that was my favorite book I read last year. And then the book I'm currently reading, I'm obsessed with. It just came out. It's called The Favorites, and it is about competitive ice dancers, which is not something I ever had an interest in. But all we know is like some big scandal happened between them, and something bad happened in this world of like really competitive ice dancing. And the story is being told both through the lens of a documentary that's like recounting the story of this, and also the person who it involves telling the first story narrative of as it goes. And I feel like in the book world, it's like I've seen everyone talking about it as far as all my friends are obsessed with it. And it's got this just like addicting quality of just like, I must compulsively read more. Like I was literally sitting on the couch and my boyfriend was playing video games, which is pretty much his cozy evening of choice. And I was like, yeah, I just like read 100 pages in this book. And he was like, wait, I've been sitting here this whole time with you. Like, how did you just like tear out that reading? So I haven't finished it yet. So there's part of me that's like, I hope I can continue to give this recommendation. But from what I've heard, it's really spectacular. If anyone liked Daisy Jones and the Six, it has that kind of vibe. And then it's also technically a Wuthering Heights retelling, but I read that in high school and I can't tell you like a single fact about it besides the character names. So don't feel like you have to know that.
I love how you read fiction or like you do the video games because sometimes I feel like it's important that not everything we do has to be personal development or something that's quote unquote productive. So it's like, oh, if I read, like I have to read a personal development book, or at night I have to do something that's like I'm learning or expanding or kind of that mentality of like go, it's like a hustle, but in like a different way where you can't even honor like the fun and the rest of like sometimes it's a bath or just reading like a romance novel or a fiction or video games or something that doesn't quote unquote feel productive, but it's
Mm-hmm.
productive in a different way. And I feel like you've done a good job of kind of rewriting that script and really honoring that balance that actually allows you to thrive more. That I think so many women think that like even podcasts or whatever, like I should always be listening to something and keep listening to this one. But you get what I mean? Like it always has to
Totally.
be something that's like productive, learning, etc.
Yeah.
Makes you burn out because consuming is still consuming. So even if like you're reading but you're always consuming like information, that's still your brain like exercising and it's not necessarily as relaxing. So I love that you really incorporate that balance.
Yeah. I mean, I'm such a believer that we do need rest. We do need fun. We do need things that to me, yeah, is reading this book about ice dancers going to make me a better content creator? Not directly, besides the fact that it will give me content to talk about on my account. But does it light me up and does it recharge me? Does it let my brain go somewhere else so that when it does come back to being social media, Kayla, I feel like I can like give it my all? Yes. And I think we so discount how important and powerful that is of just giving ourselves time to rest and recharge so that we can come back stronger.
1000%. So this is everyone's reminder to go do that even more, depending how much you've already been doing it, and to read those books if you're into fiction as well. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Kayla. Where can everyone find you so they can learn all your tips, follow all your information, all of those things?
Yes, you can follow me on Instagram at Kayla Kleinman. I'm also on Substack. It's how is it there? Substack.com/Kayla Kleinman. My Substack's called Silly Little Things, and it's that idea of the silly little things are what makes a big difference in our life. And yeah, those are probably the two places to find me.
I love it. Okay, we will link Kayla's Instagram down below. Thank you so much for coming on. This was such a fun conversation. And hopefully, also, many people will love winter more after this.
We're all trying, right?